Well, in fact, this is a historic day. Prime Minister today inaugurated the hologram of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose on account of the 125th birth anniversary of the freedom fighters. Here's a full report, and then we will also have a guest joining us on this broadcast, as tonight almost every Indian would be extremely proud.
At 6:45 p.m., India took the first step to rewrite its history.
ये दिन ऐतिहासिक है। ये कालखंड भी ऐतिहासिक है और ये स्थान जहां हम सभी एकत्रित हैं वो भी ऐतिहासिक है।
Prime Minister Modi inaugurated the hologram of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose on account of his 125th birth anniversary. The hologram will soon be replaced by a 25 feet tall statue of the Indian National Army founder made of black granite.
हमारे उन नेताजी की भव्य प्रतिमा आज डिजिटल स्वरूप में इंडिया गेट के समीप स्थापित हो रही है। जल्द ही इस होलोग्राम प्रतिमा के स्थान पर ग्रेनाइट की विशाल प्रतिमा भी लगेगी।
Prime Minister Modi also conferred 7 Subhash Chandra Bose Disaster Management Awards 2022, which included one awardee in the individual category and another in the institution category.
आज पराक्रम दिवस के अवसर पर सुभाष चंद्र बोस आपदा प्रबंधन पुरस्कार भी दिए गए हैं। नेताजी के जीवन से प्रेरणा लेकर ही इन पुरस्कारों को देने की घोषणा की गई।
The awards are aimed at honoring the values of Netaji, which are reflected in our disaster management forces as well as institutions and individuals who play an active role in the area, making disaster management and relief a people-driven initiative. Prime Minister Modi, without mincing his words, slammed the attempts to keep the true Indian history from reaching the common man.
ये दुर्भाग्य रहा कि आजादी के बाद देश की संस्कृति और संस्कारों के साथ ही अनेक महान व्यक्तित्वों के योगदान को मिटाने का काम किया गया।
The statue, he said, will be the reflection of the ultimate sacrifice made by the martyrs of the Azad Hind Fauj.
नेताजी के साथ साथ इंडियन नेशनल आर्मी के उन जवानों के लिए भी एक श्रद्धांजलि है जिन्होंने आजादी के लिए अपना सर्वस्व न्योछावर कर दिया। मैं 21 अक्टूबर 2018 का वो दिन भी नहीं भूल सकता जब आजाद हिंद सरकार के 75 वर्ष हुए थे। लाल किले में हुए विशेष समारोह में मैंने आजाद हिंद की कैप पहनकर तिरंगा फहराया था।
Reigniting the flame of independent India, the Prime Minister called on the nation to uphold nationalism.
हमें राष्ट्रवाद भी जिंदा रखना है, हमें सृजन भी करना है और राष्ट्र चेतना को जागृत भी रखना है। मुझे विश्वास है कि हम मिलकर भारत को नेताजी सुभाष के सपनों का भारत बनाने में सफल होंगे।
Ladies and gentlemen, it was a phenomenal decision that was taken by the government. Many would say a decision that was finally taken to remember our heroes. Joining us on this broadcast is General G.D. Bakshi, General Dhruv Katoch, Colonel Shailendra Singh, Ratan Sharda, Dr. Bhuvan Lal. In a short while from now, we'll also have 2 more guests joining us. Let me first begin by asking you, General G.D. Bakshi, there has been an attempt to forget our heroes, and you've extensively spoken about the contribution that has been made by Netaji, INA, and the very fact that if today our colonizers actually make an admission the admission has been big that had it not been for Netaji, perhaps the independence that we enjoy today would have been much delayed. It's the struggle that Netaji threw up is because that's exactly why the Britishers were at the end of the day deterred.
I must say I am overwhelmed. I have just returned from that function where the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Modi ji, himself, he lit that hologram of Netaji at the canopy where once the statue of King George V, who called himself the King Emperor of India, stood. It is a movement of great historical vindication. It's not just the installation of a statue. It is where it has been installed that is critical. It is on what was once called Kingsway, what was once called the path of kings, now the Rajpath. It is just behind India Gate. It is in front of the National War Memorial. I could not have, conceived of a greater rehabilitation for the man who actually got India her freedom. Look, it is about time. I have written 3 books on Netaji. I have done extensive research. There are other research scholars here. Let me tell you that the time has come for India to reclaim its history, to redefine the national narrative. For God's sake, we have the motto Satyameva Jayate. I think today truth has triumphed. And let me be more straightforward and say, the amount of peace and solace as an old soldier that I have felt today, all that is left is I bow both my hands and I request Modi ji to complete this unfinished agenda and near this National War Memorial create another war memorial for the 26,000 braves of the Indian National Army, and guys like me can then die in peace. We can die in peace. You see, because history would have been vindicated. For 75 years, a manufactured narrative, a colonial narrative was imposed upon this country. It was a foundational narrative that has done great damage to our national security. And especially in the initial years of independence, this contrived narrative of non-violence and peace and India as a pacifist country caused us not to secure our borders with China, caused us to make blunders on the issue of Kashmir. For God's sake, outgrow this idiotic narrative. You are saying India has no history of wars, and no history of courage or bravery. Have you read the Vedas? Have you heard of the Dashrajan Yudh? The Dwadashrajan Yudh? Have you heard of the Mahabharata? What is the Ramayana about? If not war fighting to protect our honor. It's only when you get into these phases of history, when you get this Pacific streak up, that you have destroyed this country. You had made it prone to every single invader. For God's sake, this is a redefining moment of history. It is not just a statue. It is where that statue has come up. The marginalization of Netaji and the INA is now history. He has been mainstreamed.
Right.
Modi ji, we request you to let us die in peace by giving us, to complement this, that INA war memorial. Whether you want to do it at the Red Fort lawns, whether you want to do it here, that is the government's decision. But 26,000 men is not a small sacrifice. 26,000 men, and you call that struggle non-violent. You insult the families of those martyrs. You insult our braves. If had Netaji been around today, his first wish would have been to create such a memorial, because you know what he did even as that war was ending? He had a war memorial created in 1945 August in Singapore. September, Lord Louis Mountbatten and Jawaharlal Nehru went there, right? The Indian origin citizens of Singapore requested him to lay a wreath at the INA War Memorial. He agreed to go. He got a phone call from Mountbatten. Jawahar, you will not go. And Mountbatten sent military engineers, the sappers, to wire up that INA War Memorial and blast it to smithereens. Smithereens, damn you! And nobody has had the guts to recreate what Mountbatten destroyed. It has taken us 75 years to reclaim our history, to establish the truth. For God's sake, you know, we must reclaim our history. We must not outsource it to Oxford or London or to Harvard or anywhere. The Russians, the French, the Chinese, their history is not written in London or Harvard. They write their history. And they write it, we have to write it based on the truth. Please study the Transfer of Power archives. Please study the testimony of Prime Minister Clement Attlee, who signed the Independence of India Act, of Lord Pethick Lawrence, Secretary of State for India, of Viceroy Field Marshal Wavell, of Commander-in-Chief British Indian Army Field Marshal Auchinleck, the governors of the various provinces of India, the Director Intelligence Bureau of the British era. Please see what they have written. We are asking for an academic debate and discussion. We are asking for rehabilitating the truth. Is that too much to ask? Thank you.
Let me also bring in Ratan Sharda at this point in time. Ratan Sharda, isn't it a proud moment for all Indians that we are breaking away from that aura of colonial history and finally appreciating the value of each of our freedom fighters? And many would say that there was a deliberate attempt to sidestep. I'll come to that in a short while from now. We also have Dr. Bhuvan Lal, who's the author of Netaji's biography, who would be able to put this into perspective. But Ratan Sharda, I just want you to talk about the proud moment that it is for every Indian today and why perhaps we can celebrate today.
Well, for me, like everybody else here and in India, it's an overwhelming emotional scene when we saw the hologram of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose being unveiled in the India, under the canopy on the famous Rajpath. For me, we as Indians have actually paid a part. We have paid part of the debt we owe to the great freedom fighters who have been neglected, who have been put behind the covers of dark shells which nobody knows about the history. And it is a history which has been, Netaji presents that history which was hidden away from us, from nameless thousands of people who laid down their lives for this country, for the freedom that they fought for. And today, with rehabilitation of Netaji's statue and his name there, we have partially paid the debt. It also shows that any kind of history written by designated so-called eminent historians, which tries to wipe away part of history, still lives on because people have very strong public memory. They have strong folk memory, folk history that has kept our history alive. Or we would have been made to believe that Mughals are very sanctimonious, very nice people who gave us culture and history. So this folk history is what it is. Netaji lived in our memories. Today, what Modi ji has done is brought him on to a pedestal where we cannot feel that. And no icon is any political icon. No icon can be divided in terms of ideology. Every leader from whichever shade of political thinking he may be or she may be, they all fought for Mother India. They all deserve the same respect, which we failed to give them. Imagine Netaji's family was spied for years together. He was hounded for years together. He was declared a war criminal by none but the head of the Congress government in independent India. And it's a shame on us. So as people who are freedom to all these brave souls, now if you read Kalyan De's book about which General Sahib has talked about, he clearly shows that British got so afraid of the rebellion in the unpopularity due to Red Fort trials due to the naval rebellion, which are a result of INA dissatisfaction and Jabalpur mutiny. They had lakhs of soldiers coming back from World War who were trained, and they understood if they don't listen to them, British cannot stand for even a day. That's when they threw up and said, okay, let us free India. But our leaders made us believe that they got it with some more request and all, nothing of the kind. We got it by the struggle of Netaji and many of his likes. And today with that, we need to now understand that we don't want to rewrite history. We want to reinsert the pages of history which have been torn away, which has been taken away from us, and let people feel proud that it was some favor from the British, nor is something favor of Lord Mountbatten, but such people who gave this indomitable spirit of Bharat, which we knew it fought continuously for hundreds of years to never go under any invader in the way it has been portrayed. And for this, we must thank today's moment. Today's movement is a turning point in decolonizing our minds, our history, and our thinking. For this, we need to compliment the government without falling into any trap of political whataboutery, etc., etc. And we have to accept what mistakes are made. Today, I would also say that all the documents, without any apology, hidden so far from the public memory, should be released. Every correspondence, whether it's British or Russian, which throws any light on Netaji's life, should be opened up, and we should know what is the real history of freedom struggle of India. Thank you.
Let me also bring in Dr. Bhuvan Lal, who's the author of Netaji's biography. Dr. Bhuvan Lal, correct me if I am wrong, and perhaps tell all our viewers who are watching in right now, with regards to the INA. Perhaps it was the INA which was in a position to demonstrate to the British that India perhaps was in a position to form a freedom army, and perhaps the kind of struggle that was displayed by the INA, led by Netaji, led to finally the United Kingdom to admit that it was Netaji which gave the strongest fight. In fact, an admission that was made by Prime Minister Attlee at a much later stage, that had it not been for Netaji, perhaps things would have been very different.
Thank you. Thank you. Today is a very historic day. Since morning, not only in India, but across the world, the Indian diaspora has been waiting for the unveiling of the statue. People of Bangladesh, people in Rangoon, people in Singapore. Incidentally, after the INA trials, when the monument built for the Indian soldiers in Singapore was destroyed by the British on the orders of Lord Mountbatten, the Singapore government has made another one. An INA marker stands in the heart of Singapore today. For many years, enemy number one for the British Empire was Netaji. Because every soldier in the Indian National Army also had relatives in the British Indian Army. And because of the efforts of Netaji, you read in the diaries of the soldiers, when you go into the details, when they were recaptured by the British, the first question they were asked, how's Netaji? What is he like? How is his leadership? What were you doing under him? That moment you realize that the entire British Indian Army, the armed forces of India, were with Netaji. The INA trial was that moment when India actually attained its freedom at the Red Fort. The new INA memorial should be built there. On top of it, once Netaji's efforts changed the loyalty of the British Indian Army, all of them became patriots. All of them became patriots. There were mutinies all over the country in the naval establishment. There was a mutiny in Jabalpur. A few days ago, General Bakshi, who's a good friend of mine, made a statement they were mercenaries. No, sir. They were patriots. They fought for the freedom of India at the end of it. They joined hands with the INA. And that not only ended the rule of the Hukumat Britannia in India, it destroyed the British Empire. Because the British armed forces were using Indians across their empire to control the despotic regime. This is the emotional moment this country has been waiting for recognizing the true heroes of our freedom struggle. stories of thousands and thousands of these revolutionaries have been wiped out from 1857 to 1947. The story of the Gadar movement, not available. The story of Lala Hardayal, Shyamji Krishna Verma, Virendranath Chattopadhyay, Pillai, wiped out, cleaned. All the revolutionaries who lost their lives in cellular jail, their names not known to India. Bhai Parmanand, not known. What he did for the country. Hanuman Sahib, not known. Govind Bihari Lal, he went to jail in America for the Indian freedom movement, not known. Today, a time has come after 75 years. We have to reclaim this. We have to reclaim our history. We have to reclaim that these people actually brought us the freedom. We don't have to depend on the British orientation of our history or the people who rewrote the history based on British revelations. That is not the versioning this country needs. We need our own history. We need the history that Indians agree with. And you will realize once you go through this, as I realized as an Indian, ordinary citizen of India, who wanted to discover what happened, who was told by his family, his forefathers, that Netaji was the man. He has been denied his position. And today, 75 years later after independence, I'm so proud that my family is witnessing this great moment when Netaji's statue stands where it should have stood on the first day of India's independence.
Let me bring in General Dhruv Khattot. General Dhruv Khattot, 75 years since independence. Why shouldn't each and every freedom fighter be recognized? Their place in history should be accorded. And not just that, not just Netaji, why not Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel? Why not others? For instance, we have seen how in our history books there have been a classification of freedom fighters, extremists, moderates, and all of that taking place. And somewhere down the line, I'll come to this non-Nehruvian who are basically being insulted time and again. But the fact of the matter is, shouldn't other freedom fighters who perhaps found themselves in footnotes or probably small paragraphs in textbooks, in history textbooks, shouldn't there be chapters dedicated to them because of their contribution to our freedom struggle?
Thank you. Oh, absolutely. You see, ultimately, what has been spoken of by the previous speakers also, it all boils down to history. And I want to give you two quotations per se. Churchill was once asked by his friend, how will history remember him? And Churchill made he made an observation. He said, history will be very kind to me because I intend to write it. Please understand the import of those words. The second statement comes from Africa. There is an African proverb which states, until the lions get their own historian, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. When we got our independence, we simply took over the history which was written by the British and by the earlier invaders who conquered parts of this country. And then post 1947, we simply repeated what those people were saying. That was not our history. It was a history written by foreign powers, the way they perceived how they had conquered this country, how they were ruling over us. And there is a very strong reason why that must be changed. Now, the ecosystem has changed. We have our historians now. And I think it is up to our historians to put across what has taken place so far, right? Put across our heroes. It is absolutely amazing that when we look at the great actions taken place by our people from Northeast India, from Southeast India, not just for the movement, not just for the freedom movement, but for the past 1,000 years, there is no mention. Now, why have they all been ignored? So there is, we need that cultural renaissance. We need to get rid of this the slave mentality that what the white man gave us is right, and whatever we do for our own selves is wrong. There is this distortion in history which has taken place needs very, very firm correction. And I think the time, this moment today is really a signal this honor which has been given to Netaji, it should have been given at the time of independence itself, in 1947 itself. We have waited 75 years. Now let us not wait any longer. The putting across history of India from the Indian perspective, from the way our people have perceived it, from the way we feel it. You see, now we are the lions. We have got our own historians, and I think we need to write that history. One more point about Netaji. You see, at that point of time when we were talking about the Second World War and the time leading up to independence, that time my father was a young officer in the Indian Army. My grandfather also served in the First World War. Now, the impact, because I would have discussions on this with my father, and one thing which comes out very clearly, what really was the impact of Netaji? Netaji especially, you see, it was his charisma. It was his charisma which made the Indian Armed Forces say, we are with Netaji. And I think that psychological shift, that moment of the psychological shift of the armed forces of India was the turning point. The British realized they cannot stay. And very wisely, they moved out. This history, I think, must be recorded. It is not too recent. It is just 75 to 100 years back. But I think it is a very important history. And for the sake of future generations, this must be recorded, must be studied. And it must give us, it will give us a sense of pride. And it will give to the people of India their destiny to be the greatest country in this world.
Let me also introduce two of our guests who have just joined in a short while ago, Srijit Panikkar and Anuj Dhar. Anuj Dhar, let me take this question to you. The fact of the matter is that there has been a trend, and that trend has been to keep insulting the non-Nehruvians. A blink and miss reference when it comes to Rajguru, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, chapters after chapters as far as Mahatma Gandhi is concerned. Then you have the Congress party itself and various others. Then you've called Lal Bal Pal as the extremist. Their entire classification in itself seems to be very discomforting. Today, what we are witnessing is for generations to come to witness what many would say, finally an acknowledgement. But what happens to the rest? What happens to this trend of non-Nehruvians being completely ignored?
Well, I still cannot get over what happened today. And I would like to just take off from where General Katosh left. And you shouldn't forget that gentleman sitting on to your right, General G.D. Bakshi, is the man of the match. So it was General Saab's idea, and nobody would. I never believed this is going to happen. I mean, to have Netaji's statue in Rajpath was absolutely next to impossible. When we know the background. Now, General Katosh was talking about Second World War. He said his father, but my grandfather also fought. He fought against Stalin actually. So what happened? There were rumblings within the Indian Armed Forces. And we have plenty of records. General Bakshi is aware of them. The plenty of records from so many military intelligence files, so on and so forth. You have letters from the Director IB and from the Viceroy Wavell, who himself was a field marshal, and also the Auchinleck, who was the commander in chief. It's very clear, crystal clear to anybody. There were rumblings within the armed forces, and that the army was the instrument with which they were ruling this country, and they decided to leave. Now, when this happened, the Congress party made full use of the whole, the rumblings which were happening, and started after the, INA Red Fort trials, when people were charged with war crimes. And when it happened, the whole country has an off, people came out in the street in the support. Within the army, people, of course, wanted, these people to be released. Congress made full use of it, even though they were against Subhash Bose and INA. They used to call them misguided, even as late as 1945. Suddenly, they had a turnaround. And they, made full use of it, came to power. And I remember, of course, reading, history books that in 1946, the cry used to be Lal Kile se aayi awaaz, Dhillon Cycle Shahnawaz Inqilab Zindabad. And when the power was transferred, the cry became Mountbatten ki jai ho, Mountbatten ki jai ho. So this is what the change. And then soon after they captured power, using Netaji's name, that all these revolutionaries, in fact, we are talking about so many of them, nothing was done for them. At least Netaji, thanks to people have been trying right from 47. H.V. Kamath, wanted his portrait to be unveiled in the assembly, which became parliament. It was not done. It happened only in 1978 because when there was no Congress party in power. But at least Netaji, thanks to people somebody as formidable as General Bakshi and so many of us, because of that fight put over 60, 70 years, something has been done to Subhash Chandra Bose. You're so right. There are so many others who have been totally, forgotten. I think about Chandrasekhar Azad, for example. Why don't we have his portrait in Parliament House? Why not? He's so eminently known. He's somebody who died for this country. We have nothing about, so there are so many of them. The whole Gadarite movement has been, pushed under the carpet. So, but I hope and pray with this new, that today is a historic day for us. With this, we will have a new start, beginning with Netaji and INA, and we will definitely go into the other. And I think Modi ji made a very good statement today. He talked about that how his government has been according respect to everybody. Baba Sahib, of course, was not given the due to him. Sardar Patel, we had a fantastic monument to his memory. Now, of course, Netaji has been given his due. At least this has been the best step ever taken by any government in free India. I hope and pray, and echoing your view, that other freedom fighters who have been left out from all the country, and I would personally put my money on Chandrasekhar Azad. I believe he has not been given his due at all completely. So they should also be given more space, and I think this is a start. Netaji will open the door for all the revolutionaries who fought for the country and all those who sacrificed so much for our nation's freedom.
Let me also bring in Colonel Shailendra Singh right now. Colonel Shailendra Singh, there are many facets about Netaji, not really written about, or some would say that no attempt was actually made to let generations after generations know the kind of forward-looking man Netaji himself was. Look at the women battalion that we are talking about. Very little has been spoken about it. So I essentially also want you to talk a little bit about the military might of the INA and why a leadership like of Netaji really mattered, and why it brought about a paradigm shift in the freedom struggle that India witnessed under Netaji.
If you can allow me, I can only tell you one thing. One doesn't have to write for Netaji. He's part of you and me. And that is why, in spite of 75 years, we are able to do justice to ourselves and our country now. What beautiful words he gave. Ye zindagi hai kaum ki, kaum par lutaye ja. The Indian Army took it India first. And I'm so proud today that our politician, our government has started realizing what does India first mean. India first means only one thing: respect those, or rather earn respect for yourself by associating yourself with those people who laid down their life at a time when it was unthinkable that yes, we will be able to get to freedom, we will be able to do X, Y, Z. You see, we can always now, at least now, overcome our differences on politics, and we bring back what the Indian National Army was created by Netaji. I can only tell you, if you do not do this honor to yourself as a country, that here is a man who tried to tell you, ye zindagi hai kaum ki, kaum par lutaye ja. What is that? That means even as a politician today, even as a government today, give me the pride as an Indian that yes, people who did something for India, they need to come up. We need to take glory from them. We are not obliging anybody by creating a statue here. Let me tell you, we are doing a great service to ourselves, that we see this statue every day hereafter, and we get motivated. We get motivated to bring more such people who gave up their life, who did everything in the name of country. कौम के लिए जिसने अपने आप को लुटा दिया. I think if we can associate ourselves and bring him back to our life, that is the biggest honor we can do, not to them, to ourselves and to our country. Think of India first, what Indian Army has brought to you. Now the government is following it. I'm proud of my government today that yes, you are now going to take this flame forward of India first. Everybody should think on same.
Let me bring in Srijit Panikar right now. Srijit, over the course of the entire day, what we have essentially seen, a lot of people have spoken about the fact that perhaps it is time for us to revisit our own history. General G.D. Bakshi also spoke something on the similar lines, that Why not do that? Because what we have seen is that these political beliefs seeping into our textbooks without realizing the kind of impact that it has on young minds, because those are those impressionable minds. If we don't talk about our revolutionary heroes, our nationalistic heroes, then who is going to talk about it?
Yeah, truly. Shravan, the message here is that it was not just one or two people who brought us our freedom. It was a collective. And that collective may have had conflicting views and ideas among them. Some maybe were proponents of ahimsa and some were of armed fight. But it was this collective that won us freedom. So there has to be a fair share of that we have to return to each one of them and place them appropriately in our history. And that's for the posterity to come. Now, there has been a long-standing demand to give Netaji a proper memorial in the heart of Delhi. How has the dispensations, the political dispensations, honored it so far? I myself have written articles about it. I have a good friend from Durgapur in West Bengal who has been literally pleading to the President of India and the Prime Minister through letters almost every day to build a memorial for him in the heart of Delhi. The Congress governments never obliged it for obvious reasons. Even after the statue of King George V was mutilated and subsequently removed, the space under that canopy was kept vacant for about half a century. The Congress cabinet deliberated this, and the decision was to erect another statue, but of Gandhiji. And the second in line was Pandit Nehru, and the third was a least favorite Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose among the candidates. Now, what we had in Delhi all these years was an abandoned memorial at Tikri Kalan, a place that is at least 30 kilometers away from the India Gate, which did not even have a place on Delhi's official tourism map. It was constructed in 1998 and abandoned since 2000. We know about the Chalo Delhi clarion call made by Netaji, and he wanted to bring all his fighters post the war to Delhi after winning it. But we know that the destiny was different, and therefore it is only appropriate for a country with a lot of passion and pride in our history, our heritage, to finally give him his deserving place in the heart of the city. And I think there is no better place to have his statue in Delhi than under this particular canopy, because he is going to supplant King George V in the place where the Emperor of India stood for 3 decades. Truly deserving, very well done union government, very well done. And therefore, these are the steps. These may be very small steps, but these are the steps that will inspire a generation and all the future generations to come. And as my good friend Anuj Dar said, there has to be more statues, more memorials for a lot of great people who would otherwise be forgotten from history, who would be erased from history. It has been a long struggle, 75 years since we got our independence, and this is the right time for giving them all their due.
Well, in fact, there has been a growing chorus. The chorus essentially being that when you have had historians who have called Bhagat Singh, Surya Sen, Chandrasekhar Azad as revolutionary terrorists, and that forms a part of a curriculum as far as the Delhi University is concerned, then there is a lot to rethink. And General G.D. Bakshi, I'll need to slip into a short break, but I'll come back to you, because the question that I wanted to ask you, and on the other side of the break, which I intend to, is that have we done enough? Just a statue, or there is much more to be done? Something that General G.D. Bakshi has already spoken, but I'll come back to him and also some of my other panelists to get a sense of what more can be done and what more should be done, rather. Welcome back. Let me take this question now to General G.D. Bakshi. General G.D. Bakshi, in your opening remarks, you essentially made a point of what more can be done. I also want to ask you, as far as the declassification of the files are concerned, and also the story about the fact that during Indira Gandhi's regime, we're talking about how files of Netaji were essentially destroyed. So what I want to ask you is, what next? What more should be done in order to truly honor Netaji? I'm not too sure whether General G.D. Bakshi, if you can hear me. We'll try and reconnect with General G.D. Bakshi in a short while from now. Let me bring in Colonel Shailendra Singh. Colonel Shailendra Singh, something similar to what I was asking General G.D. Bakshi in terms of what needs to be done. Given the fact that we are talking about this entire thing about the fight between our colonial history, the colonial warriors, and now, that should be put to rest, because finally India is at the cusp of recognizing the efforts that were put by several of our freedom fighters.
worry about what the colonial history says. India is a new India. It is on a super wave. It is on an expressway. We are now no more on those, teda meda sadak with lot of potholes. We are on expressways now. The concept is of expressway. And what is that? That what we have started, if we are convinced, which we should be, if we can take pride in what justice we are doing now today to all these people, I think we can continue on it. It is not necessary that I have to only honor Netaji. This is only a start. Let us start honoring. Let us start taking the honor of all those people who have done anything and everything for the COM. And COM is my country. If I cannot learn that, yes, all those people whom we can keep blaming because of politics have been ignored and whatever, let us bring back. That is the need of the hour. If you can bring back, that means you are on the right way. If you only bring back Subhash Chandra Bose, I don't think you are going to do justice to yourself and to your country.
You make a fantastic point. Let me bring in General G.D. Bakshi once again. General G.D. Bakshi, we have seen history books calling Bhagat Singh, Surya Sen and Chandrasekhar Azad as revolutionary terrorists. The fact of the matter is that you've spoken at length about how history should be rewritten. What I want to ask you is, while we have seen a hologram statue being installed, what more needs to be done? Or do you think at least this is just a beginning?
Absolutely, this is the beginning. And like I said at the outset, the thing to complete this, very, very, what shall I say, symbolic step. One is the statue of Netaji on Rajpath. Previously, we had them only in Chowdi bazaars, in dirty street corners. That is where he was relegated to, because the space in Lutyens, Delhi had all to be dedicated to one saint of our freedom and one family, right? There was no space. Push his statues to Chowdi Bazaar. From Chowdi Bazaar, he has been brought out and put center stage. From the total marginalization of Azad Hind Fauj and Netaji to the mainstreaming. What we need to do very urgently, and in this year, because it is so symbolic, is the 125th birth anniversary. We need to have a war memorial for the 26,000 martyrs of the Azad Hind Fauj. You see, insult has been added to injury. We have that little doggerel, "De di hame ajadi, bina khadag, bina dhal, Sabarmati ke," etc., etc. Right? The simple fact is, 26,000 martyrs who laid down their lives have been buried, forgotten. Those who survived were denied their pensions, not taken back into the Indian Army on the orders of Mountbatten. Lord Louis Mountbatten, treated as traitors. Sir, I agree you were then a dominion. You are now a republic. We must get right who is a traitor and who is a patriot, who is a terrorist and who is a revolutionary. I'm very sorry to state that cowardice cannot be enshrined as principle, all right? It cannot become highfalutin principle. And some people, to gain political legitimacy, tried to wipe out the sacrifices of the INA warriors and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Let me put it in perspective. What is the total number of names on the national war memorials? Since 1947 to date, we have 26,244 names of martyrs. This includes all the wars from 47 to Kargil to Galwan, all the counter-terrorist operations and campaigns. Out of the Army, Navy, Air Force, total strength 30 lakhs, 1.3 billion. Here is a force of 60,000 that sacrifices 26,000 or 44%. It is a colossal scale of sacrifice. And it is criminal that you buried it. It is criminal. You see, when you spin doctor history, when you want to blow up a colonial narrative because, sir, we are so faithful to the Raj and hail Mountbatten ki jai, like hell. Please don't forget that the British looted $44 trillion from India. India was once generating 25% of the world's GDP. It was brought down to less than 2%. There were 6 famines in India. I hope you remember. There were 6 famines in India, in the last of which 3.5 million died in the Great Famine of Bengal, 1943. Right. About 3 to 4 million died in the previous famines. The Holocaust in India is about 18 to 20 million people killed by starvation. It puts the Jewish Holocaust in the shade. And yet there are people who would like to hug the British. I mean, it's fine that we carry no rancor for the present citizens of Britain. But for God's sake, get your history right. It is cowardice not to face up to your oppressor.
Right.
Not even to admit that you were oppressed, that genocide was committed against you. Mass murder and mayhem. You see, what should we do? We must build the INA War Memorial, either close to this statue, wherever the government deems fit. One suggestion I can make is, since the INA's war cry was "Hum Dilli Dilli jayenge, Lal Kile pe Tiranga fehrayenge," the trials, INA trials, were held at the Red Fort. They were to be hanged at the Red Fort. So it would be befitting historical justice to build it into the lawns of the Red Fort. On one corner, there's a very nice piece of, very silent piece of ground where you could honor their memory, or you could do it next to this statue, or wherever the government, that is the government's choice. We can only make suggestions, number one. And more important than that, more important than monuments, is the reclamation of our history. Can we please set up a panel of academics and scholars and military historians and all those who have a stake in getting to the truth? Because the truth, sir, concerns us all. We are not saying distort history. We are not saying saffronize history. Damn it, we are saying get to the truth. Go by empirical facts. Please go through the transfer of power archives. There are primary sources of the decision makers of the British Empire on how and why they gave you freedom. And you will please read the military appreciation by Field Marshal Auchinleck in December 1945. He said there are 2.5 million, 25 lakh Indian soldiers who are being demobilized. There are only 40,000 British troops. We have lost the trust. We have lost the allegiance of the 25 lakh Indian soldiers.
Right.
Even if they throw stones, we will not be able to survive here. We have 18 months to get out with due grace. He had made contingency plans to get 5 British divisions. He had made contingency plans to withdraw all British officers and ladies and their families to the cities of India which had either a port or an airfield.
Right.
So that, like Kabul, they were planning this contingency planning. Why? Because of Netaji, the INA, and the impact it had on the British Indian armed forces. He wrote all this. Initially, he was poo-pooed by London. He had said the first revolt could start as early as February, March. And the revolt started. That is when British decided to cut their costs and run. But the pity is they handed over power to a set of collaborators and quislings.
Right.
Who glorified the Raj.
Right.
Who tried to aim for continuity. If the Raj sought to divide you on caste lines, you are still divided on caste lines. Faithful servants of the empire.
General Judy Bakshi, just...
All right? I think we need to outgrow the empire.
Absolutely. General G.D. Bakshi, I'm running short of time. I'll just give 30 seconds to Ratan Sharda to close this debate. Ratan Sharda, as General G.D. Bakshi already pointed out, I just want you to conclude this debate about what more needs to be done. And more importantly, as has been pointed out, that even today, the Britishers seem to be extremely upset. When Prime Minister named 3 islands of Andaman with Netaji's name, we saw the kind of uproar that British newspapers had. So it still affects them. So Ratan Sharda, I just want you, 30 seconds, I'm really running short of time, the way ahead.
See, let us stop writing history. History is his story. Story of the victor, story of the British. We need to go back to writing itihasa, as it happened. So when we start writing as it happened, everything will fall into place. We don't know about Birsa Munda. I asked somebody, Birsa Munda, she said, who Birsa Munda? The tribal freedom fighter. We don't know about Rani Gaidenliu, the Nagaland freedom fighter. We do not know about Shafekar Bandhu, the first revolutionaries who the entire family went to the gallows. If these are the things we don't even know about, if we keep on harping on the British-made colonial history, naturally British are upset because they had colonial slaves, mentality of slaves who were sitting from 1947, repeating what they were and treating them with kid gloves and treating them with great reverence. That has gone. So naturally they're upset. But what are they today? A tiny nation who cannot fight even the basic issues of their life. So we must realize we're a much bigger country. We are a self-respecting country, but we earn respect. We give respect to our own freedom fighters, and that must be given by remembering them, by respecting them, letting our coming generations know that we had spilled our bloods, our forefathers spilled our bloods to gain this freedom fight, which happened all over India, not just in Delhi or Sabarmati.
Well, thank you very much, General G.D. Bakshi, General Dhruv Katoch, Colonel Shailendra Singh, Ratan Sharda, Dr. Bhuvan Lal, Srijit Panikkar and Anuj Dhar for joining us on the debate.